Hey, Jonathan, Dave here. I'm going to respond to what I see. You're talking about John the Baptist. First of all, I'm in a kind of in a not the best place in the world as far as the events that's happened. But I guess answering this is kind of why some of the events happened. Like today, I just quit my job. It's already as poor can be. So I quit my job. Couldn't understand why Satan was able to do that, but I think I'm getting it now. And I thought, well, maybe I can go visit my sister. I haven't had any family in over 9 years. I haven't had Christmas with anybody in over 9 years, and I thought, well, maybe since I'm off because I lost my job, well, maybe I can have Christmas with my sister, maybe. But that door was shut too. But I think I see why now. I think I'm starting to see what's going on here. So I'm gonna tell you what I suppose. And I'm going to tell you one more thing about me. I got a spiritual gift of understanding. If you go to Sid Roth on one of his shows, you'll hear a guy named you'll see a guy named Shane Wall that has two gifts. He can see angels, and he also has the gift of understanding. And why is the gift why is understanding in the Bible more than faith, more than grace? Well, it's because of spiritual DNA. You see in this, you see Satan in Genesis planted a seed, and if you know anything about a seed is continues as long as it's got ground, it'll multiply into infinity. And see, that has to do with the secret of John the Baptist. Why? That's the secret of everything. Everything in the Bible ties with everything. And trust me, you do not want my gift. You don't want it. But anyway, I don't go into all that. So anyway, I mean, I've went through hell in my life. I've lived in hell. But that's coming to an end, hopefully. I see the way. I see the way. So I hope you're not jealous because I see what I see. But you don't want what I have. No one wants to have what John the Baptist has. I didn't ask for any of this. I never wanted to be a preacher or teacher of any of that stuff. I never had no desire for any of that. But once it came, then, it is what it is. So anyway, why is John the Baptist, why is John the Baptist special? Why is he considered one of the greatest of men? What It's really simple. Once you have the gift of understanding and you get 44 years of downloads from God that no one knows about but you, because no one can see the way you see, like the wise men in Israel that first discovered Jesus, who were separated from religion, like John the Baptist, who was separated from the DNA that Satan planted in the leaven of the scribes and the Pharisees, what blinded them. You see, lies blind. The people have the DNA of Satan in them, and they don't know it. The church is full of it. I can't even enter into a church. I mean, I can now. I think I'm strong enough now to enter into it, but I don't want to. Because I perceive it, I see it, I feel it, I sense it. I'm like a canary that can almost get sick by it. So anyway, what did John the Baptist really consume? Was it the grasshoppers? No, what he consumed was he was away from man and the disease of man. Jesus said, "What's in man?" It's that disease, that DNA of Satan that constantly is propagating into infinity. The disease that they can't see. And when Jesus came, of course, they couldn't see that it was Jesus because of that disease. Of course, it's in the church now, and people can't see it. So let me go into some other secrets while we're talking about secrets, because I saw something when I saw this. You see, John the Baptist was separated. What? I'm going to throw a secret out there, and I'm not a theologian. Maybe you can crack it. Maybe you can figure it out. I just know what I see, and I believe it's true. But I'm not a theologian. I don't study the Bible. I just have the gift of understanding and the revelations. So maybe you can figure this one out. You see, the separation of John the Baptist from man. Most people understand, and I can't remember if I just told you about the time thing. Oh, no, I didn't. I was starting to type you about that. You see, I believe that time, that Adam and Eve, there's two separate creations in Genesis. You see one creation that God told to prosper and multiply. Then you see another creation that didn't have any babies, that were like the angels in heaven. That's what I believe. That's what I see. And see, they were separate. They were separate. They were not joined with the other ones. They were not joined with the other creation. The other creation was keeping the earth. So when they sinned, the earth would be ready for them to come out. So one group was keeping the earth. The other group was in the garden. God had a special plan for them. So, how do I know that? Because God stopped time for me twice when I was praying. I have a very pure heart, even though it's been defiled since. But I'm on my way back, and I know the way. I know exactly how to do it. But you got to understand that they were separated from other man. They were totally separate. So, of course, the first thing God says to Abraham, separate yourself from them. What did John the Baptist do? He separated himself from them. Why did the wise men be able to see what they see? They were separate from the religious DNA that Satan sowed there that blinded them. So John the Baptist became the greatest. How did he become the greatest? Because he had the least amount of satanic DNA in him. I was going to write a book about DNA that I cracked back in 2008. Somebody else on Sid Roth wrote it. I couldn't believe it. Could not believe it. I was like, what? No, but I still have the knowledge of it. Probably even better than him. So anyway, going on to my story. Going on to my story here. See, in Genesis, they there was no they were separate. There was no time. There's no time in the kingdom of heaven. So in the Garden of Eden, with Adam and Eve, who were like angels and did not sleep with each other, they didn't sleep until they didn't have sex until they fell. So they were in the garden, set apart, chosen with God. Is my theory anyway. And there was no time. Because there's no time in the garden. Now, if you want to see someone else that believes the same thing that I do, because I had that revelation back 20 years ago about the time thing, because God stopped time, and I didn't know what it meant. Why did He stop time when I was praying? When I have a very pure heart. When I focus on something, the purity of it is so intense. I mean, I can purely sin, just like David in the Bible purely sinned and committed adultery, had someone killed. I can go either or. Jesus said, if the light be in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? So some of us can purely enter into something and purely be it. Of course, all humans do that. But anyway, there's another guy on Sid Roth that discovered the time thing. And I already knew about it because I already experienced it and kind of figured it out. His name's Tony Kemp. So when Moses was up, I don't know how many days it was near God in the mountain, Tony read when he was taken up into heaven, one of the books were open, and he saw that time was suspended. Now I already knew. I already had figured out the secret of Genesis. I already knew. So see, there's nothing that God can't do. Time, He created it. If if I'm a watchmaker and I create a watch, then I have control over how fast or slow it goes. I even think that's the secret of the 120 years. All of a sudden, He said, "Well, let's speed up time." Now, I don't know exactly scientifically how you would do that. I know dark matter and dark energy, they're just now discovered it. And perhaps the faster that dark energy moves through the universe, maybe that controls time. How it speeds it up and slows it down. I don't really know. All I know is God can control it. I think. I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to try to figure that one out. But anyway, you see, after man fell, and sinned, and of course then they joined with the other race of men that were on the earth because they were out of their dimension when they entered into their place. And then they both were together. Then of course the first thing that happens is God separates Abraham from the rest of them. And then of course we know in the Old Testament how that they're destroying the tribes that are in Israel. And God said, make sure you destroy them all. And of course, the reason He wanted to destroy them all was because their DNA, their spiritual DNA that Satan had sowed into them. Because Satan's always planting his seed, which is a way of believing, a way of thinking, and it's a powerful thing. And this even ties into racism. A lot of blacks think that people are racist against them based on their skin color. That's absolutely 100% ridiculous. Of course, there is the rare white person out there that does think that way, but for the most part, which they don't see, which they call racism, is their cultural DNA. They have a cultural way of DNA about them that they can't see. They can't see it. It's one of the biggest things that I have a problem with, at least the people in my area that are black. Not that skin color has anything to do with anything. Skin color does not control your behavior. If you believe that, you're insane. The only thing that controls your behavior is your mental/spiritual DNA that you grew up with. Now, the white man afflicted the black man, and the black man, anytime you oppress anybody, people can turn to survival mode. And in survival mode, people might start to steal. It's when you're in the, I mean, you have two choices when you're stressed. You either, well, three, you either die because you can't eat because you don't have a job, or you figure out another way. And remember the word way. Jesus is the way. So they found another way, unfortunately, because of the oppression of the white man. And that other way just happened to be a crimeful way. It developed in their culture. And that's in any culture. I mean, look at the rich bankers that had a culture of ripping off the United States because they knew that the United States would have to bail them out. That's a culture. It's a way of thinking, and that's just as much a part of that culture as in many black cultures, some crime. And in where I lived, right, if you would go down the hill toward the city, the white culture there, it was a poorer culture, and because it was a poorer culture, they were pretty deadly down in there. And that has to do with culture. It has nothing to do with skin color. But Satan loves confusion. And as long as he can divide us and us not be able to see what's really going on, then he can get us fighting over silly things. I don't even know why I threw that in there. It just maybe I shouldn't even have talked about it, but it is what it is. And like I said, there are some white super stupid people out there that actually don't like the black people based on their color alone. There are some of those super stupid ones. That are just, they're just brainwashed by their culture. Yes, they do exist. But anyway, I don't know why I went there. That's such a touchy subject. But anyway, John the Baptist, the secret of John the Baptist, why he was so great, is because he was separated from the DNA. But he still had the DNA of and that's even the secret of why they sacrificed animals. Their blood was pure. Their blood didn't have sin in it. So John the Baptist goes out among nature, which is pure for the most part. It's a pure thing, and the DNA of it's good thing, pure thing. As far as what it imputes, he ate grasshoppers, but what his mind ate was pure. And then you even have Buddhism. Buddhism teaches you how to let go of all of that spiritual darkness that encroaches on one's mind, and then they have a clear mind. So then in Buddhism, they connect with this They think it's Buddha. They actually think the spirit, what they're connecting to when they get their mind free, they actually think that that's a Buddha. That's the spirit of Buddha. Buddha's everywhere, like God. But what they're actually connecting to is actually the spirit of God, and they don't know it because they have this wisdom comes when they free their mind from everything else in the world. All of a sudden, this wisdom starts approaching because that heart fabric of their thoughts that originate from Satan, once that cleared off, it puts them a step closer to what it was like in the Garden of Eden. So as that starts to approach, as soon as they lose that covering, that veil that Satan created by his spirit and the words of his DNA and all that stuff, as soon as that veil was removed, then all of a sudden they start sensing this understanding, this wisdom that comes. And they think that that's Buddha. But it's truth. It's truth. It's God. God's everywhere. And they start to sense that, and they get wisdom, and they think, whoa. But so John the Baptist is out without all that spiritual DNA mess. He's separated from all that, from the seed of Satan, that DNA that was put inside of man from Genesis, that multiplied, that Satan's always trying to propagate one way or another, that people can't seem to see, that is there, and that people meditate on. The Bible says meditate on the Word of God, but since sin and the power of Satan reigns through a word, we meditate on that word. And that's what I was kind of meditating on today. Some chick at work threw a spiritual word at me that made me quit my job, and it was a powerful satanic word, and that she communicated a lie to my boss, and my boss, not knowing the truth, believed that satanic word, and then that's kind of what I'm doing here right now. And maybe that's what God planned, who knows? Maybe God's separating me from everything for a season, because I just cracked a secret yesterday that's going to help me get closer to Him. And what's that secret? That secret is knowing. If you look at the Bible, it says, if you keep my commandments. What is that? If I keep a commandment, why would I keep a commandment? Why would I even do that? That's the first step of getting to know God, because that's His commandment. That's His authority. That's His word. That's His law. That's His wishes. That's His will. It says, "Thy will be done on earth as heaven." So it says, God talks about in John chapter, I don't know, somewhere 15, 16, 17, somewhere in there, he starts revealing these secrets of how to get God to manifest Herself to him. And one of the first things is, if you start to fall in love with the commandments. Now, we got the world, which is the total opposite of today. They want to have sex, and then they want to abort 80,000 babies a year, because one sin leads to another sin, and it propagates into that direction until you have all mess. So they didn't keep that first commandment. So then it just goes haywire in the other direction, and sin yields more sin and produces more sin and produces more death. And it starts going into infinity, and then you have a nation that's like it is in the days of Noah, when God just wanted to utterly destroy it because every thought of their heart was evil. And then we're kind of heading in a direction, as Jesus said, in the days of Noah, you'll start to be like that. So anyway, going back to John the Baptist was, he was separated. He separated himself from all of that world, and that's what the world is. It's the imputed DNA of Satan. Everybody thinks the world is, the Christians confuse what the DNA of Satan is. DNA of Satan is a very tricky hidden thing that people just can't see. So it's also even self-righteousness in the church. How you got Christians in the church that say, "Oh, I went to church for 30 years, and they just pat themselves in the back, and they look at other Christians. He skips, he doesn't go to church for whatever reason, and he's like, "Oh, you're a sinner because you didn't go to church." So that's a DNA thought of Satan, because it's based on self-righteousness, and it's just thick in the church, and it's just that scribe and Pharisee type mentality that Satan planted in Israel, that actually rose up and destroyed the Son of God. And so John the Baptist separated himself from all that DNA, and because he had less of that DNA in him than regular man, he was the greatest. And then going back to the story of Genesis, of how they were separate from the rest of them, they remember how Jesus, so I believe that in the Garden of Eden, and Adam and Eve, they before they fell, they were like angels, and I think in some way, that's what I sense. A different. They had no worry. Do you understand that in Genesis they absolutely had zero worry? There was no worry. They didn't know what fear was, and see, that goes back to knowing. Fear is actually the thing. Is they came out of Israel, they had the wrong spirit. They had the wrong spirit. They had a spirit of fear, a spirit of unbelief. And it even says in Revelations, if you have unbelief, the unbelievers will have their part in hell. And the Christians don't think of those type of sins. But in the Garden of Eden, there was no. Remember, Jesus says you have to become like a little children to enter into the kingdom. And he's not really talking about being saved. He is and he isn't. He's both. It's talking about entering into the kingdom. You have to become a little child. What do a little child does? A little child has a spirit in which they get close, like Mary was at one point. Mary was very close to Jesus at one point, and her faith was just a reflection of that. But then you see her drift away from Jesus as he moves on to his ministry, and she continues in her life, and she's more kind of focused on that. And then she can't even seem to talk to him. She can't break through to even talk to him. And Jesus kind of like disses her and says, well, to the crowd, well, whoever I forget exactly what he says, but he disses her. And that was because she kind of drifted away from him. Her heart put that first, and then you go in the temptation of Jesus. What did he tempt Jesus with? Fame, glory, all that stuff. I mean, who doesn't want that as a human being? Who doesn't want that type of attention? You got the celebrities that love that type of attention. Everybody, that's a, but there's nothing really wrong with it in one sense. There's nothing wrong with fame, but, but, Jesus says you're gonna go whatever your heart treasures is where you go, right? Whatever your heart treasures is where you go, and then God says, "Where art thou?" So, going back to Genesis, God says to Abraham, "Separate yourself from them. Separate yourself from them." But there was a point where John, after he was in a good place, connected with them. And before I close here, do not think that I'm good because I know anything. I'm not good. We're only as good as our next thought, and we're only as good as the blood of Jesus is applied to us. The Bible says, if the light be in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? We can swing from angel to demon in a heartbeat. That's why we're not good. And sometimes, and what really makes us not good is we don't know it. But no, I'm not good. I'm 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 not. I have the gift of understanding, but the gift of understanding is just to try to draw me closer to God. That's what all the gifts are trying to do. But that doesn't make me good because I understand stuff. It gives a degree of revelation and understanding, but I guess I better end this. I'm out of time. Didn't really even touch too much on stuff, but whatever. But anyway,